quiet town of Maplewood, nestled between dense forests and rolling hills. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. It was on one such evening that Sheriff's Deputy Mark Thompson received the call that would change everything. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio, urgent and filled with concern. A local hiker had gone missing in the woods, and the search and rescue team was being mobilized. Mark felt a familiar rush of adrenaline as he gathered his gear, knowing that the night ahead would be fraught with uncertainty. As the team assembled at the station, the atmosphere was tense, yet focused. Flashlights were checked, first aid kits were stocked, and maps were spread out on the table, each marked with the last known location of the missing hiker. The team, a mix of seasoned veterans and eager newcomers, shared a collective determination to bring the hiker home safely. Mark, with years of experience under his belt, took charge, outlining the search strategy and assigning roles. They would split into groups, combing through the thick underbrush and rugged terrain, their hearts heavy with the weight of the unknown. As they ventured into the woods, the sun vanished completely, leaving only the pale light of the moon to guide their way. The trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying gently in the cool night breeze. Mark led his team deeper into the forest, the sound of crunching leaves beneath their boots echoing in the stillness. It wasn't long before an unsettling feeling began to creep in, a sense that they were not alone. The air grew thick with tension, and the usual sounds of the forest seemed to fade away, replaced by an eerie silence that sent shivers down Mark's spine. Then, just as they reached a clearing, a sound pierced the quiet, a low, haunting whistle that echoed through the trees. It was unlike anything Mark had ever heard, a chilling melody that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. The team exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions mirroring the confusion and fear that gripped Mark's heart. He tried to shake it off, attributing it to the stress of the situation, but the whistle came again, closer this time, sending a jolt of adrenaline coursing through him. As they continued their search, the whistling persisted, weaving in and out of their conversations, growing louder and more insistent. It felt as if the forest itself was alive, watching them, mocking their efforts. Mark's instincts kicked in, urging him to remain vigilant, but the unease gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The team pressed on, calling out the hiker's name, their voices swallowed by the darkness. But hours passed, and the search yielded no signs of the missing hiker. The whistling had become a constant presence, echoing through the trees, taunting them with its mystery. Mark's heart raced as he tried to maintain focus, but the emotional weight of the unresolved case began to take its toll. Each passing moment felt like a failure, a reminder of the life that was still out there, lost and alone in the vast wilderness. The fear of the unknown loomed large, and Mark couldn't help but wonder if they were searching for a person, or something far more sinister. As the night wore on, the team regrouped, their faces drawn and wary. Mark could see the doubt creeping into their eyes, the fear that they might never find the hiker. The whistling had grown fainter, but its presence lingered, a ghostly reminder of the night's unsettling events. Mark felt a deep sense of responsibility weighing heavily on his shoulders. He had dedicated his life to protecting the community, and the thought of failing to bring someone home was unbearable. Finally, as dawn broke and the first light of day filtered through the trees, the search was called off. The team returned to the station, defeated and exhausted. Mark sat in silence, the weight of the unresolved case pressing down on him. The whistling, once a haunting melody, now echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the night's events. He couldn't shake the feeling that they had missed something, that the forest had secrets it was unwilling to share. Days turned into weeks, and the search for the missing hiker continued, but the emotional impact of that night lingered in Mark's heart. The unresolved case haunted him, a shadow that followed him wherever he went. He replayed the events over and over in his mind, searching for answers, for closure. The mysterious wolf whistles became a symbol of his failure, a reminder that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, the darkness can swallow you whole. In the end, the case remained unsolved, a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the mysteries that lie within the woods. Mark knew that he would carry the weight of that night with him forever, a haunting experience that would shape his perspective on the job he loved. The eerie occurrences, the unsettling whistling, and the unresolved fate of the missing hiker would forever be etched in his memory. On a warm summer evening, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the small town of Willow Creek. The air was thick with the sweet scent of blooming flowers, and the laughter of children echoed in the distance. Two sisters, Emily and Sarah, decided to take advantage of the beautiful night by heading to the local playground, a place filled with fond memories of carefree days spent swinging and sliding. With their hearts light and spirits high, they packed a small picnic and set off, eager for an evening of fun and sisterly bonding. As they arrived at the playground, the familiar sights greeted them. The brightly colored swings swaying gently in the breeze, the towering slide, glistening under the fading light, and the merry-go-round that beckoned them with its nostalgic charm. The playground was deserted, a stark contrast to the lively atmosphere they remembered. However, the sisters shrugged off the eerie quietness, attributing it to the late hour. They spread out their picnic blanket beneath the old oak tree, its branches swaying softly, and settled in for a night of laughter and snacks. As they munched on their sandwiches and shared stories, the sun finally disappeared, leaving the playground bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. The sisters took turns pushing each other on the swings, their laughter ringing out into the stillness of the night. But as the minutes passed, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. The air grew colder, and the shadows around them seemed to stretch and twist in unnatural ways. Emily paused mid-swing, her laughter fading as she glanced around, sensing that something was off. Suddenly, a strange noise broke the silence, a low rustling sound coming from the nearby bushes. The sisters exchanged nervous glances, their playful moods shifting to one of unease. "It's probably just a raccoon," Sarah whispered, trying to reassure herself more than her sister. But as they continued to swing, the rustling grew louder, accompanied by an odd rhythmic thumping that sent chills down their spines. The sisters' hearts raced as they strained to listen, the innocent intentions of their night quickly overshadowed by a growing sense of dread. "Maybe we should go," Emily suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. But before they could gather their things, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, standing just beyond the playground's edge. The figure was tall and cloaked in darkness, its features obscured by the night. The sisters froze, their hearts pounding in their chests as they tried to make sense of what they were seeing. The figure stood motionless, watching them with an intensity that made the air feel thick and suffocating. "Who are you?" Sarah called out, her voice trembling. The figure didn't respond, but the rustling intensified, as if something was moving behind it. Panic surged through the sisters as they realized they were not alone. The innocent fun they had envisioned for the night had turned into a nightmare. They quickly gathered their belongings, adrenaline coursing through their veins as they prepared to flee. Just as they turned to run, the figure took a step forward, and the sisters caught a glimpse of something glinting in the moonlight, a knife, or perhaps a tool, held loosely in its hand. Fear gripped them, and they sprinted toward the playground's exit, their hearts racing as they heard the figure begin to move behind them. The sound of footsteps echoed in the stillness, growing closer with each passing second. The sisters' breaths came in quick gasps as they dashed through the playground, the swings creaking ominously in the wind. "Run faster!" Emily shouted, her voice filled with urgency. They raced toward the path leading back to the street, their minds racing with thoughts of escape. The darkness seemed to close in around them, the shadows stretching and twisting as they ran. The figure was gaining on them, and the sisters could feel the weight of fear pressing down on them, urging them to push harder, to escape whatever was pursuing them. As they reached the edge of the playground, Sarah stumbled, her foot catching on a root. Emily quickly turned back, grabbing her sister's hand and pulling her up. "We can't stop. We have to keep going," she urged, her heart pounding in her chest. They sprinted down the path, the sounds of the playground fading behind them, but the feeling of being watched lingered in the air. Finally, they burst onto the main road, the streetlights casting a warm glow that felt like a safe haven. They didn't stop running until they reached their home, breathless and trembling. The door slammed shut behind them, and they leaned against it, hearts racing as they tried to process what had just happened. The laughter and joy of the playground were replaced by the chilling memory of the figure lurking in the shadows. As they caught their breath, the sisters exchanged wide-eyed glances, the reality of their experience settling in. They had gone to the playground seeking fun and adventure, but instead, they had encountered something far more sinister. The innocence of their intentions had been shattered, replaced by a haunting fear that would linger long after that night. They vowed never to return to the playground after dark, forever changed by the chilling experience that had turned their innocent outing into a night of terror. Detective Laura Mitchell had always been drawn to the intricacies of crime. With a degree in criminal justice and years of experience on the force, she had honed her skills in investigation, analysis, and deduction. Her training had taken her through the rigorous demands of the police academy, where she learned the fundamentals of law enforcement. Forensic Laura had a knack for piecing together puzzles that others found too complex, and her reputation as a diligent detective preceded her. However, nothing could prepare her for the case that would haunt her for years to come. The small town of Maplewood had a rich history, but it was also marred by a series of unsolved crimes that lingered in the shadows of its past. The most notorious of these was the disappearance of a young girl named Emily Carter, who had vanished without a trace over 2 decades ago. The case had gone cold, leaving the community in a state of unresolved grief and speculation. Laura had always been intrigued by the case, often revisiting the files in her spare time, hoping to find a clue that had been overlooked. One fateful afternoon, while Laura was reviewing old case notes in her office, she received a call that would change everything. 2 young boys, out fishing at the nearby river, had made a shocking discovery. They had stumbled upon what appeared to be human remains, partially buried in the mud along the bank. The news sent a chill down Laura's spine, and she quickly gathered her things, racing to the scene. The spot she arrived, the air was thick with tension, and a small crowd had gathered, whispering in hushed tones. The boys stood nearby, their faces pale and shaken, clearly affected by what they had found. Laura approached the boys, kneeling down to their level. "Can you tell me what happened?" she asked gently. One of the boys, a freckle-faced child named Tommy, spoke up, his voice trembling. "We were just fishing, and then we saw something in the mud. At first we thought it was a log, but then we saw a shoe, and then we realized it was a foot." The words hung heavy in the air, and Laura felt her heart race as she processed the implications of their discovery. The area was quickly cordoned off, and forensic teams arrived to begin the grim task of recovering the remains. As Laura stood by, watching the scene unfold, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was somehow connected to Emily Carter's case. The shoe, the foot. Everything pointed to a long-guarded secret that was finally coming to light. The emotional weight of the moment pressed down on her. As the investigation progressed, the remains were identified as belonging to Emily Carter. The news sent shockwaves through the community, reopening old wounds and igniting a firestorm of emotions. Laura found herself at the center of it all, tasked with piecing together the events that had led to Emily's tragic fate. The case was gruesome, filled with details that made her stomach churn. As she delved deeper, she uncovered a web of deceit, betrayal, and long-held secrets that had festered in the town for years. The emotional toll of the case weighed heavily on Laura. Each new revelation felt like a punch to the gut, and she often found herself reflecting on the impact of Emily's disappearance on the community. Families had been torn apart, friendships shattered, and trust eroded. The once tight-knit town was now filled with suspicion and fear, and Laura felt a deep responsibility to restore some semblance of peace. She spent countless nights poring over evidence, interviewing witnesses, and revisiting old leads, determined to bring justice for Emily and her family. As the investigation unfolded, Laura faced pushback from some members of the community who were reluctant to revisit the past. They feared that reopening old wounds would only lead to more pain. But Laura knew that the truth had to come out no matter how difficult it might be. She was driven by a sense of duty, not only to Emily, but to the entire community that had been affected by the tragedy. The emotional burden of the case became a constant companion, haunting her dreams and clouding her thoughts. The more Laura uncovered, the more she realized that the case was not just about solving a crime, it was about healing a community. She organized town hall meetings inviting residents to share their memories of Emily and discuss the impact of her disappearance. Slowly, the town began to come together, united by a shared desire for closure and justice. Laura found solace in the stories that emerged, each one a testament to Emily's spirit and the love that surrounded her. As the investigation reached its climax, Laura finally identified the person responsible for Emily's death, a figure from the town's past who had managed to evade justice for far too long. The arrest sent ripples through the community, a mix of relief and anger as they grappled with the reality of what had happened. Laura felt a sense of vindication, but it was bittersweet. The emotional toll of the case lingered, a reminder of the lives forever changed by a single act of violence. In the end, Laura's discovery of the gruesome case from the past became a catalyst for healing in Maplewood. The town began to rebuild, learning to trust again and support one another in the wake of tragedy. Laura, too, found a sense of closure, knowing that she had played a part in bringing justice to Emily and her family. The emotional scars would remain, but the community emerged stronger, united by the shared experience of loss and the hope for a brighter future. As Laura reflected on the journey, she understood that while the past could never be changed, the present and future were still within their grasp, and together, they could forge a new path forward. The old Whitmore house stood at the end of a long, winding road, its silhouette looming against the twilight sky like a forgotten relic of a bygone era. The paint was peeling and the windows were clouded with dust, giving the structure an air of neglect that sent shivers down my spine. As a child, I had always been drawn to the stories that surrounded the house, tales of ghostly apparitions and strange happenings that sent the neighborhood kids into fits of excitement and fear. But, standing before it now, I felt a deep sense of unease wash over me, as if the very walls were whispering secrets I was not meant to hear. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when my friends and I decided to explore the Whitmore house, emboldened by the thrill of adventure and the promise of a good scare. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced across the ground as we approached the creaking front door. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and trepidation, and as we pushed the door open, it groaned in protest, revealing a darkened hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly into the unknown. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of mildew, and the floorboards creaked beneath our feet as we ventured further into the house. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, peeling at the edges, and the remnants of furniture lay scattered about, draped in white sheets like ghosts waiting to be uncovered. I could feel a chill in the air, a palpable tension that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching us with 1,000 unseen eyes. As we explored the dimly lit rooms, strange occurrences began to unfold. A sudden gust of wind swept through the hallway, slamming the door shut behind us with a deafening bang. We all jumped, exchanging nervous glances, but our curiosity pushed us onward. In one room, we found an old mirror, its surface clouded and cracked. As I peered into it, I could have sworn I saw a fleeting shadow dart behind me. But when I turned around, there was nothing there, just the empty room and the oppressive silence that enveloped us. The feeling of being watched grew stronger as we moved deeper into the house. I could sense a presence lurking just beyond my line of sight, a weight in the air that made it difficult to breathe. My friends laughed nervously, trying to shake off the unease, but I could see the fear in their eyes. We stumbled upon a staircase leading to the second floor, and a step creaked ominously beneath my weight, echoing through the stillness like a warning. At the top of the stairs, we found a long hallway lined with doors, each one closed tight as if guarding its secrets. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest, but the thrill of discovery urged me forward. We opened the first door, revealing a dusty bedroom filled with old toys and forgotten memories. As I stepped inside, I felt a sudden chill, as if the temperature had dropped several degrees. Suddenly, a soft whisper echoed through the room, barely audible but unmistakable. "Get out," it seemed to say, sending a jolt of fear through my body. I turned to my friends, who were now wide-eyed and frozen in place. The whisper came again, more insistent this time, and I felt an overwhelming urge to flee. We stumbled back into the hallway, our hearts racing as we tried to make sense of what had just happened. As we hurried down the stairs, the feeling of being watched intensified, as if the very walls were closing in on us. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and I could hear faint footsteps echoing behind us, though when I turned there was nothing but darkness. Panic surged within me, and I urged my friends to leave, my voice trembling with urgency. We burst through the front door, the cool evening air hitting us like a wave of relief as we stumbled onto the porch. Once outside, we stood in a huddle, breathless and shaken. The old Whitmore house loomed behind us, its windows dark and foreboding. We exchanged stories of what we had experienced, each of us recounting the whispers and shadows that had haunted us within those walls. The thrill of adventure had turned into a shared trauma, a bond forged in fear that would linger long after we left the house. In the days that followed, the encounter haunted my thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been awakened within the Whitmore house, a presence that had been waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. I found myself drawn back to the stories of the past, the tales of the family that had once lived there. The experience had left an indelible mark on my childhood, a reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead. As I grew older, the memory of that day remained etched in my mind, a chilling reminder of the unknown. The Whitmore house became a symbol of my childhood fears, a place where the line between reality and the supernatural blurred. I often wondered if the whispers I had heard were a warning or a plea for help. The encounter shaped my understanding of fear and the mysteries that lie beyond our comprehension, leaving me with a lingering sense of unease that would follow me into adulthood. Even now, as I reflect on that fateful day, I can still feel the chill in the air and hear the whispers that beckoned me to leave. The old Whitmore house stands as a testament to the power of the unknown, a reminder that some places hold secrets that are best left undisturbed. The experience taught me to respect the shadows that linger in the corners of our world, for they may hold truths we are not yet ready to face. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood where I lived. It was a typical Friday evening, and I had just finished a long week of work. The air was crisp, and the faint sound of laughter from children playing in the distance filled me with a sense of comfort and safety. I decided to take a leisurely stroll around the block, enjoying the peacefulness of my surroundings and the vibrant colors of the autumn leaves that crunched beneath my feet. As I walked, I admired the charming houses lined up along the street, each one adorned with decorations for the upcoming Halloween festivities. Jack-o'-lanterns grinned from porches, and cobwebs hung from trees, creating a festive atmosphere that made me feel at ease. I waved to a neighbor walking their dog and exchanged pleasantries with a couple out for a jog. Everything felt normal, and I relished the tranquility of the evening. However, as I turned onto a quieter side street, the ambiance shifted. The laughter faded, and the shadows grew longer, stretching across the pavement like dark fingers reaching out. I noticed a figure standing at the end of the block, partially obscured by the trees. At first I thought nothing of it, assuming it was just another resident enjoying the evening air. But as I approached, the figure was a man, tall and lean, dressed in a dark hoodie that obscured his face. He stood motionless, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, and I could feel his gaze on me as I walked closer. My heart began to race, and I instinctively quickened my pace, trying to shake off the feeling that something was off. I glanced back, and to my dismay, the man had shifted slightly, his posture now more alert, as I continued down the street, I could feel the tension building in the air. The man began to walk in my direction, his steps slow and deliberate. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that he was just another person out for a walk. But the way he moved, almost as if he were stalking me, sent a chill down my spine. I decided to change my route, turning down a side street that led back toward the main road. I glanced over my shoulder, and to my horror, the man had altered his course as well, following me at a distance. My heart raced as panic set in. I quickened my pace, my mind racing with thoughts of what could happen if I didn't get away. The once familiar neighborhood now felt foreign and threatening, the shadows growing darker with each passing moment. As I approached a small park, I spotted a group of people gathered near the playground. Relief washed over me, and I headed toward them, hoping the presence of others would deter the man from following me. But as I neared the park, I glanced back again, and my stomach dropped. The man had stopped at the edge of the street, watching me intently, his expression unreadable. I could feel his eyes boring into me, and a wave of instinctual fear washed over me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I approached the group of people who were laughing and chatting, and I felt a momentary sense of safety. I stood at the edge of the playground, pretending to be engrossed in my phone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. I stole another glance back, and the man was still there, lingering at the edge of the park, his presence a dark cloud hanging over me. The laughter of the children and the chatter of the adults faded into the background as my mind raced. I needed to get home, to put distance between myself and the stranger who seemed intent on following me. I waited for a moment, watching the man from the corner of my eye, and when I saw him take a step closer, my instincts screamed at me to leave. I turned on my heel and headed back toward the main road, my heart pounding in my chest. As I walked briskly, I could feel the man's gaze on me, a heavy weight that made it difficult to breathe. I glanced back one last time, and to my horror, he had started to follow me again, his pace quickening. Fear surged through me, and I broke into a run, my feet pounding against the pavement as I raced toward the safety of my home. The world around me blurred as adrenaline coursed through my veins, drowning out everything except the sound of my heartbeat and the rush of my breath. I turned onto my street, my mind focused solely on reaching my front door. I could hear footsteps behind me, echoing in the stillness of the evening, and I pushed myself to run faster. The familiar sight of my house came into view, and I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. I sprinted up the driveway, fumbling for my keys as I reached the front door. My hands trembled as I inserted the key into the lock, glancing back to see the man standing at the edge of the street, watching me with an unsettling intensity. With a final burst of energy, I flung the door open and slammed it shut behind me, locking it with shaking hands. I leaned against the door, my heart racing as I tried to catch my breath. The safety of my home enveloped me, but the fear lingered, a dark shadow that clung to my thoughts. I peered through the window, watching as the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. The encounter left a lasting impact on me, a reminder of the fragility of safety and the darkness that can lurk just beyond the familiar. I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability that settled over me, a sense that the world was not as safe as I had once believed. The experience taught me to trust my instincts, to be aware of my surroundings, and to never take my safety for granted. In the days that followed, I found myself looking over my shoulder more often, the memory of the stranger haunting my thoughts. I became more cautious, avoiding quiet streets and taking well-lit paths whenever I ventured out. The encounter had changed me, instilling a sense of wariness that would linger long after that fateful evening. I learned that fear can be a powerful teacher, reminding us to stay vigilant and to cherish the moments of safety we often take for granted. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the street, I pulled up to the old Victorian house at the end of Maple Lane. The home had an air of neglect about it, with peeling paint and overgrown weeds that seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers. I had received a call earlier that day from a frantic homeowner, claiming that the electrical system was malfunctioning. As an electrician with years of experience, I had seen my fair share of strange situations, but something about this house sent a shiver down my spine. Stepping out of my truck, I felt a chill in the air that had nothing to do with the temperature. The wind rustled through the trees, and I could hear the faint creaking of the house as if it were alive, groaning under the weight of its own history. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease that settled in my stomach. Pushing the door open, I was greeted by a musty smell that hit me like a wall. The interior was dimly lit, with only a few flickering bulbs illuminating the dusty hallway. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, peeling at the edges, and the floorboards creaked ominously beneath my feet. I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me, but I brushed it aside, reminding myself that I was here to work. As I stepped further into the house, I noticed bizarre elements that made my skin crawl. The living room was cluttered with strange artifacts, old dolls with cracked porcelain faces, their eyes seemingly following me as I moved. A collection of taxidermied animals lined the shelves, their glassy eyes staring blankly into space. I couldn't help but feel as though I had stumbled into a macabre museum rather than a home. The unsettling atmosphere weighed heavily on me, and I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. I made my way to the basement, where the electrical panel was located. The stairs creaked under my weight, and I could hear the faint sound of dripping water echoing in the darkness below. As I reached the bottom, I flicked on my flashlight, illuminating the cramped space. The walls were damp and the air was thick with the smell of mildew. I approached the electrical panel, but as I examined the wires, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Suddenly, I heard a noise from behind me, a soft shuffling sound that sent my heart racing. I turned quickly, shining my flashlight into the shadows, but there was nothing there, just the darkness and the oppressive silence that enveloped the basement. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves, and returned to my work, but the feeling of unease lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. As I worked on the panel, I noticed something strange about the walls. They were covered in what appeared to be strange symbols and markings, etched into the wood as if someone had been scratching at them in a frenzy. My curiosity piqued. I leaned closer to examine them, but a sense of dread washed over me. The symbols were unsettling, almost ritualistic in nature, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thoughts racing through my mind. I was just an electrician, not a paranormal investigator. But as I continued to work, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeply wrong with this house. The air felt charged, heavy with an energy that made my skin prick. Just as I was about to head back upstairs, I heard a voice, a low, raspy whisper that seemed to come from the shadows. "Get out," it said, sending a jolt of fear through me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned slowly, shining my flashlight into the darkness, but there was no one there. The basement felt suffocating, and I could feel panic rising within me. I needed to get out. I hurried up the stairs, my pulse racing as I reached the main floor. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone lurking in the corners, but the house was empty. I took a moment to collect myself, trying to rationalize what I had just experienced. Maybe it was just my imagination, fueled by the eerie atmosphere of the house. I shook my head, trying to dispel the fear that clung to me like a shadow. As I gathered my tools and prepared to leave, I noticed a door at the end of the hallway that I hadn't seen before. It was slightly ajar, and a faint light flickered from within. My curiosity got the better of me, and against my better judgment, I approached the door. I pushed it open slowly, revealing a small room filled with old photographs and newspaper clippings. The walls were plastered with images of missing persons, their faces frozen in time, each one accompanied by a headline detailing their disappearance. My stomach churned as I recognized some of the names, people who had vanished from the neighborhood over the years. The room felt like a shrine to the lost, and I could feel the weight of their stories pressing down on me. I stumbled back, my mind racing as I connected the dots. The man who had called me earlier, the one who lived in this house, he was a last known resident of the area, a recluse who had kept to himself for years. Rumors had swirled about him, whispers of strange behavior and a past shrouded in mystery, and I had heard the stories, but I had never imagined I would find evidence of something so sinister. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was standing in the lair of a man who had likely been involved in the disappearances. Panic surged through me, and I turned to leave, my heart racing as I retraced my steps. I needed to get out of that house, away from the dark secrets it held. As I reached the front door, I heard a noise behind me, a soft shuffle, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. My blood ran cold, and I glanced back, my breath hitching in my throat. The man stood in the doorway of the room, his face partially obscured by shadows. He looked disheveled, his eyes wild and unkempt. "You shouldn't have come in here," he said, his voice low and gravelly. Fear gripped me, and I bolted for the door, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I flung it open and sprinted into the night, the cool air hitting me like a wave of relief. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck, fumbling with my keys as I tried to unlock the door. My hands shook, and I could feel the man's gaze burning into my back. I finally managed to get the door open and jumped inside, slamming it shut behind me. I locked the doors and started the engine, my heart racing as I peeled away from the house, leaving. The unsettling experience haunted me long after I left that creepy home. I couldn't shake the images of the missing persons from my mind, nor could I forget the man's chilling words. I had entered a world of secrets and shadows, and I knew that I had narrowly escaped something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The encounter left me with a lingering sense of unease, a reminder that sometimes the darkness hides in plain sight, waiting for the unsuspecting to stumble into its grasp. I vowed never to return to that house, but the memories of that night would stay with me forever. A haunting reminder of the thin line between safety and danger. The night was still, the kind of stillness that blankets the world in a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves outside my window. I lay in my bed, cocooned in the warmth of my blankets, the soft glow of the moonlight filtering through the curtains, casting delicate shadows across the room. My bedroom was a sanctuary, filled with familiar comforts, a stack of books on the nightstand, a cozy quilt draped over the foot of the bed, and the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air from a diffuser I had set up earlier. It was a space that usually brought me peace, but on this particular night, an unsettling feeling crept into my mind as I drifted off to sleep. I awoke suddenly, my heart racing, but the room was still shrouded in darkness. The clock on the wall ticked softly, and I could hear the distant sound of a train whistle echoing through the night. I tried to move, to shake off the remnants of sleep, but my body felt heavy, as if it were encased in lead. Panic surged through me as I realized I couldn't move at all. I was trapped in my own body, a prisoner of my own mind. The sensation was terrifying, and I struggled against the invisible restraints that held me down. As I lay there, paralyzed, a sense of dread washed over me. It was as if the air in the room had thickened, becoming oppressive and suffocating. I could feel a presence in the room, something dark and malevolent lurking just beyond my line of sight. My heart pounded in my chest, and I fought against the paralysis, desperate to scream, to call out for help, but no sound escaped my lips. I was utterly helpless. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A dark figure standing at the foot of my bed. It was tall and shadowy, its form indistinct and shifting, as if it were made of smoke or darkness itself. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to focus on it, but the more I looked, the more it seemed to blur and distort. The figure was featureless, yet I could feel its gaze piercing through the darkness, locking onto me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. I wanted to look away, to close my eyes and pretend it wasn't there, but I was frozen in place, unable to escape the horror unfolding before me. The figure began to move, gliding closer, its presence filling the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. I could feel the temperature drop, a coldness seeping into my bones as it approached. It felt as though the very essence of fear had materialized before me, and I was its captive audience. I damned. As it drew nearer, I could sense an energy radiating from it, a palpable darkness that seemed to wrap around me like a shroud. I could feel my heart racing, each beat echoing in my ears as I fought against the paralysis. The figure loomed over me, and I could almost make out a shape, a silhouette that hinted at something human, yet utterly alien. It was as if it were a reflection of my deepest fears, a manifestation of everything I had ever dreaded. In that moment, I felt a wave of despair wash over me, a crushing realization that I was utterly alone. The figure reached out, its hand extending toward me, and I felt a surge of terror unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was as if the very air around me had thickened, suffocating me in its grip. I wanted to scream, to cry out for help, but the sound was trapped in my throat, a silent plea that echoed in the void. Just when I thought I could bear it no longer, the figure suddenly withdrew, retreating back into the shadows. I felt a rush of relief, but it was short-lived. The paralysis began to fade, and I could finally move my limbs, my body trembling with the remnants of fear. I sat up in bed, gasping for breath, my heart racing as I scanned the room for any sign of the dark presence. But the room was empty, the shadows retreating back to their corners, leaving me alone in the dim light. The experience left me shaken to my core. I could still feel the lingering chill in the air, the weight of the figure's gaze pressing down on me. I turned on the bedside lamp, flooding the room with light, desperate to dispel the darkness that had invaded my sanctuary. My hands shook as I reached for my phone, the familiar glow offering a small measure of comfort in the aftermath of the encounter. In the days that followed, the memory of the experience haunted me. I found it difficult to sleep, the fear of the dark figure lurking just beyond my line of sight, gnawing at my mind. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound that might signal its return. The shadows in my room seemed to grow longer, more menacing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I confided in friends about my experience, but their reassurances did little to quell my fear. They dismissed it as a common occurrence, a product of stress or fatigue, but I knew what I had felt. The darkness had been real, and the figure had been more than just a figment of my imagination. I began to research sleep paralysis, delving into the stories of others who had encountered similar experiences. The tales were chilling, filled with descriptions of shadowy figures and oppressive presences, and I found solace in knowing I was not alone. Yet, the emotional aftermath lingered like a dark cloud over my life. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, every creak of the house sending my heart racing. I installed blackout curtains to block out the moonlight, hoping to create a cocoon of safety. But the darkness still felt suffocating. I found myself avoiding sleep whenever possible, fearing the return of the figure that had invaded my dreams. As weeks turned into months, I tried to reclaim my sense of security, but the experience had left an indelible mark on my psyche. I began to question the nature of reality, wondering if there were forces beyond my understanding that lurked in the shadows. The fear of the unknown became a constant companion, a reminder that sometimes the darkness holds secrets we are not meant to uncover. Eventually, I sought therapy to help process the trauma of the experience. My therapist encouraged me to confront my fears, to acknowledge the darkness without letting it consume me. Through our sessions, I learned to find strength in vulnerability, to embrace the uncertainty of life rather than shy away from it. I began to practice mindfulness and meditation, grounding myself in the present moment and learning to let go of the fear that had taken root in my heart. Though the memory of that night still lingers, I have come to understand that fear is a natural part of the human experience. The dark figure may have haunted my dreams, but it also taught me resilience and the importance of facing my fears head on. I learned to find light in the darkness, to seek comfort in the familiar, and to embrace the beauty of life, even in the face of uncertainty. As I lay in bed now, I still feel a twinge of unease when the night falls, but I remind myself that I am not alone. The shadows may dance around me, but I have the strength to confront them. I have learned to reclaim my space, to fill it with light and love, and to embrace the unknown with open arms. The haunting presence may have left its mark, but it has also paved the way for growth and healing, reminding me that, even in the darkest moments, there's always a glimmer of hope waiting to be found. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue to create engaging stories and discussions that resonate with our audience. Don't forget to like and share this video with friends and family who might appreciate a good scare or thought-provoking narrative. Together, let's continue to explore the mysteries of fear and the unknown, one story at a time. Thank you for watching.